Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, Director of Content and Communications at World Football Summit. After months of trying to make this happen, I am thrilled to bring you an awesome conversation with Mike Amstrong, CMO at Juventus Football Club. As a marketer at heart, I'm a big fan of the work he's doing at the club. I believe that initiatives like the Juventus Creator Program is what the industry needs to tap into new avenues of growth. Mike and I cover marketing fundamentals at a football club, the role of content, innovation. Honestly, this was a conversation that I'll remember for years to come. Before we kick off though, remember, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice. Share it with your friends in the industry as well. You will not believe how much that helps us bring guests like Mike to the show. And you want to stay ahead of the curve, subscribe to our newsletter. That's where you'll find updates around our events, resources, anything that you want to find around what's going on in the industry. You can find the link in the show notes. Remember, World Football Summit Asia is taking place in December 2nd and 3rd in Riyadh. Are you going to join us? You can check the details on our website. Now, nothing else from my side. Let's welcome Mike Amstrong to the World Football Summit podcast. Well, Mike, after months of trying to set this up, I am actually thrilled to have you as a guest on the World Football Summit podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. Sorry it took so long.
Yeah, no, don't need to apologize. You're a busy man. You guys are busy. You're doing amazing stuff, and that's what happens when you're doing busy stuff. You don't have as much time for anything else. So I really appreciate this. And you've had, as we were speaking offline, a busy week. So appreciate it even more. Mike, we're talking marketing today, and I'm a marketer at heart, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Before we go into it, though, I was, wondering if you could just, there might be one or two out there who don't know who you are, but more importantly, I always like to ask my guests, why is it that you do what you do?
Sure. So for me, I like probably many in the industry. When I was younger, I had an aspiration to be an athlete. So unfortunately, I failed at that mission. And so I always had a love for sport. But I'd say I spent about 10, 15 years in consumer packaged goods. And from a professional point of view, I really learned that I love to work in sports because you're working on something that people are just genuinely very passionate about. And so what myself and the team get to do every day, you should feel very lucky because the product that we're trying to market is something that just people adore, and they do more so than I'd say products and services in many other industries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just like, I feel completely aligned to that, failed athlete, but really appreciate this, the passion that people live sports. So, we're on the same page there. And Mike, one of the things I wanted to start off with is talking about marketing. At Juventus, your CMO at the club. I guess, how do you measure success of your role? Let's start with that, right off the gate.
Sure. On our side, I'd say if you're in marketing at any football club, there's two sides to the equation. One is typically fan driven. It's important that we continue to be fan centric, and so we've got lots of objectives that are set into place that really focus on the fan. The second is commercial, and so that's where we need to be an enabler of driving revenue for the business. And so I'd say at a macro level, our KPIs fall into those two camps.
Mike, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, and I want to get your opinion on this. I've been asking this to many industry leaders around the world. You see a debate between the fan and the customer. And what I mean by this is, you see football clubs trying to convert fans into customers. When you look at other industries around the world, they're actually trying to turn customers into fans. So, what's your opinion on this? I mean, what's your take?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a really eloquent way of putting one of the challenges of the football industry right now is, I mean, I think historically and still to some extent today, football clubs are inherently B2B businesses. And so they're very fortunate. We're very fortunate that you have fandom, you have affinity of customers that want to spend time with you, that want to provide information, uh, but they really aren't built as direct consumer businesses, and so they're not really strong, generally speaking, at converting fans into customers. As someone who's come from outside of football, I had the complete opposite problem. To your point, where most other industries, they're really strong direct to consumer companies, and they really would love to one day have anywhere close to the amount of fandom that a football club would have. And so, I'd say we're in a period of evolution right now in the industry where football clubs are tooling and getting better at figuring out how to keep the fandom that they have that's core to the business, but also do a better job at converting into customers.
And to that point, Mike, I'm thinking, where do you fall under another debate, which is football or sport in general? Is it supposed to be entertaining or is it entertainment?
I think another good question. I mean, for me, I think football has to be entertaining, because if it isn't, then we really will struggle with keeping people inside the 90 minutes. That said, I think what we're seeing is this trend of the entertainment beyond the 90 minutes is becoming more and more interesting, and where we're seeing more and more eyeballs over the years. And so I think the answer is it has to be both, because I mean, certainly if you're paying for tickets to go to an event and you're not entertained, then you're not going to come back. But I think what we're seeing more and more is the industry is shifting from being entertaining football match to being an entertaining category that includes everything outside of the pitch as well too.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point, I remember having this conversation with Julie Irvin from Angel City FC. And there was a sentence that she's told me, and it stuck with me ever since, which is every match is someone's first game. So when you think about it, you really need to start delivering on that for experience, but then have it a long lasting impact. And to your point, it has to be entertaining because if not, people will not come back. And that's what you need, no? And then I was also thinking about a conversation I had with Peter Moore, former CEO at Liverpool. And we were speaking about how he used to run the club with a local heart and a global pulse. And to your point, Juventus has, correct the numbers if I'm wrong here, but I think you guys have like 170 million fans, and 90% of which are outside of Italy. They're international, no? So, but then you look at football, and it's really local. It's a local sport, you know. So how do you manage that? Call it tension, if you will, to nurture the local fans, but also get close to the international fan.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I mean, the 170 is right. That's our social media audience, and absolutely, we've got this I guess interesting opportunity where we've got over 90% of our audience that's all over the world. People are sometimes surprised to hear that. I argue with the notion that football is local because I think maybe that's the case with say Gen X boomer audience, but if you look at young audiences all over the world right now, I don't think they see geography in the same way. I think that they can be a supporter or a follower or a fan of a club purely online, and that can be okay. So I think that the definition of football being local is something that, in my opinion, is going to become dated over time. I think it's very easy to follow and engage intimately with players, with clubs, with brands across sport all over the world now. And 10, 15 years ago, you just weren't able to do it like you are today. So the only way to connect with the club was really local. It was local TV, local radio, local stadium. And so how we try to um, address the audiences is certainly, I mean, we've got a lot of research because we're quite data oriented in terms of who our fans are, how they're segmented, because they're tremendously different all over the world. Local is always going to be critical for us. I mean, it's our home, and we need to provide great experiences for fans. We need to grow here. But I'd say we're constantly running different strategies to address like what the local market needs, and then also what the international market needs. But then even within local and international, you've got different subsets of those groups. You've got young and old, you've got men and women, you've got families and non. And so it's a bit of a complex matrix. And so that's why the way we look at it is a segmentation of fans, where they are, and then what their need states are. And then we try to build strategies against that. From a growth perspective for us, one opportunity that we have that a lot of clubs don't is Juventus, from a name, um, inherently isn't linked to a city like a lot of other clubs. And so that gives us a wonderful opportunity to, I'd say, um, reach for global in a bigger or maybe more easier way than other clubs that really are known to be centered to that city. And so I'd say that's a wonderful advantage that we have.
I actually hadn't thought about that, but you're completely right. And I guess in today's world, and this is one of the reasons I also wanted to bring you on, is to talk about content, because at the end of the day, it's all about becoming or being relevant as a sports brand. No, and I understand this is one of your key priorities from what I've heard from you in the past, and that's but it's difficult, because all these sport properties are creating content all over the place, and I'm not speaking only about the match. I'm speaking about the highlights. I'm speaking about documentaries. I'm speaking about, I mean, you name it. No, how do you guys approach this? How do you stand out in a world with so much content saturation?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree. I mean, we've heard it before, the attention economy. I love someone named Evan Shapiro. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he often shows the media entertainment landscape, and he shows essentially the size and the aggregation of tech and media companies within that space. And then when you look at sports properties and leagues within there, all of a sudden you feel very humble, very small. And so it's a huge challenge. It's something that I speak a lot with the team here about is we have to take a risk. We have to innovate. We have to try new things because really in the grand scheme of the entertainment category, we're very small. And so we have to really experiment. And then if you look today at, I mean, who's earning attention, a lot of the times now it's influencers, social media stars that nobody knew about a few years ago. And so, I mean, if we look at a few examples of right now, you've got like Mr. Beast, who's spinning off into consumer products. You've got Logan Paul and KSI that attempted to compete with, I mean, Gatorade, Powerade, like massive brands with huge budgets. You've got what Ibai's been doing with the PK and the Kings League just in the last few years. Those are examples of creators that have only existed for a short period of time and have taken content and turned it into massive businesses. And so I think what sport can learn from that is that storytelling is very powerful, and there's a content to commerce opportunity, and there's examples of it all over the world. And so what we're trying to do is really um, study some of those examples and figure out how we can borrow with respect some of what some of these other players in the, say, creator economy are building.
Yeah, I like that, the content to commerce opportunity. No, I haven't heard it phrased like that, and you're completely right. If football properties are able to tap into that, I guess you could justify having content become another pillar of the traditional sports business model, which is, I guess, what you're aiming for. And that's where the Juventus Creators Lab initiative comes in, no? And you actually won a World Football Summit award for that, so congratulations. But I guess, I wanted to understand. I guess everybody knows about it now, but maybe just talk us about the approach and how it leads to fan engagement. And then, to me, the more engagement you get, it leads to revenue. No, so how are you tackling that journey?
Sure. Thanks again. It was a huge team effort to pull off the Juventus Creator Lab, and so it's while you and I are chatting, there's like a huge group of people that are behind it and driving this success every day. So some background, I guess, for the listeners is first, everything for us started with research and insight. And so, I mean, what we learned, I've been at Juventus for about 3 years. And early on, I was new to the industry. And so I really needed to see some data and some facts. Early on, what I saw was um, first, our fan base, as we've talked about, is scattered. So they're all over the world. And so one challenge becomes, how do you appease that really scattered or fragmented group? The second was, it was difficult for our fans to connect to us through broadcast because of time zone, which is a great reason for it, because they just aren't interested in leaning in for 90 minutes. Um, because there were coverage gaps, and so they couldn't get the broadcast easily. And so we have this gap in that our fans worldwide were having difficulty connecting to us through, say, traditional means, through broadcast. And then we're seeing research that's showing that young audiences are really very interested in what's outside of the 90 minutes, and that new fandom, so new following of football clubs. Now the number one driver of that is content. And it used to be, your parents were supporting a club, and if you didn't support that club, then you're in trouble. Whereas now, actually, content is the top driver amongst young audiences as to what signals them to start to follow a club. So when we added up the, say, fan research, uh, and then you put beside that the fact that Juventus at that period of time, so call it 3 years ago, we were going through a transformation where we were going through a cycle. Ronaldo had left the club, and most, I'd say, sports teams, they really leverage players in a blunt way as their distribution vehicle. Like, that's how you connect through the global audience, and that's what builds their channels. And so the pairing the fan research with the business need, like, we need to be engaging audiences, not fully reliant on players and performance. And we need to give fans what they're asking for, and what we've seen in the research around the world. When we looked at the sports landscape, we still saw a lot of, said in the most respectful way, like traditional broadcast models, sports desk with the, you know, person sitting behind it doing pregame, during game, post game. And so our feeling was, that's not a model that's going to engage the next generation of audience or our existing international fans. And so let's continue to do the traditional content that we're doing, because that's still necessary. But let's build a totally new model that we haven't seen in sport before, borrowing from the creator economy. And so what we built was a LA style YouTuber house gaming studio where we hired influencers and content creators to work for us, to tell stories in lots of different ways. And that's really helped us. And so I'd say from a video views, impressions, engagements, value delivery back to our sponsors, everything is significantly up in a period of time where we should have seen a massive drought because of the exit of a huge star player, actually a few, say, large star players. And so I'd say the feedback so far is from a fan perspective, we're telling a larger variety of stories across more mediums than we ever have in the past. And so we're giving them more intimacy. And then from a business perspective, the metrics are there where we're seeing all the numbers up and to the right significantly in what was, I'd say, a difficult cycle that we went through.
Interesting, because as you said, you would assume that once you lose your star players, engagement or followers kind of fall down, but you've been able to actually keep growing. So I think that's worth highlighting there. And also you were mentioning about how you're effectively creating an ecosystem with all the partners and all the influencers, no? So you're kind of like tapping into different audiences. And for example, one of those partnerships that you guys have, just to give it like the actual, let's say, tactic here, is a partnership with the World the Freestylers Football Association, no? With Dan, our good old friend Dan. So how, I don't know if you can go into details of the type of content that you're creating there, just for people to actually really understand what you guys are doing.
Yeah, sure. And I guess just on your last point, I mean, we've looked at it as uh, how can we build that business model that's not as reliant on the other side, the player performance side? I mean, that's one of the tough things about being in marketing and sport is your, say, in a blunt way, your control of the product is zero. Like when I worked in consumer packaged goods, if a beer tasted off, you change the recipe. In football, if you work in marketing, you're a glutton for punishment in a way because you don't have any control over what happens on the other side. And so if you're doing a good job, you're driving strong numbers regardless of what happens on the other side. And so that was the thinking and the model that we had to come up with out of a state of necessity, really. And so we're really happy and proud that the numbers are there. I mean, in the past 3 years, we've been the fastest growing amongst the top European clubs. Um, uh, we are amongst the top 10 brands on TikTok worldwide, even outside of sport. And so the numbers are there. From a freestyle football perspective, yes, Dan Wood is an angel and a wonderful person. And so I'll give him a massive warm shout out. Um, but the initial thinking was freestyle football is like a wonderful derivative of football. You've got it's international, it's fun, it's competitive, um, it's I mean you're exercising while you're doing it, so it's healthy for you, or it should be. And we just didn't see um, football clubs. Um, Partnering with the World Freestyle Football Association. And so for us, our feeling was maybe the football industry saw it as like a lesser derivative of football. Whereas my point of view and our point of view was um, it's supporting a football movement all over the world. And so we should try to help them. And so Juventus has always been, I'd say, an agitator in a good way. um, and so, can we help Dan and the Freestyle Football Association to continue the movement that they've set off on, to encourage more people to get into the sport and to celebrate it? And maybe if a big football comes and a club comes and supports them, then that can also help with, call it, credibility, authenticity, said in the most humble way. And so what we've done so far with them is first we asked them how we could go about having an official Juventus freestyler. And really my early discussions with Dan was like, how do we do this in a way that respects the community? And so we don't want it to just be marketing. Like how do we actually do it in a way that listens to the freestyle movement around the world and isn't seen as like an invader into the space. And so we worked with Dan on how we could essentially build this contest that would find us a freestyler. And so we're the only club now that I know of that has an official freestyler. And he's both competing as well as doing content. We've shot a documentary on him and his life and where he came from and how freestyle ultimately, he says, it's his word, saved his life. And so if you haven't seen it and you're a listener, I mean, it's on our YouTube channel for free right now. I mean, check it out. And then to build on that, the next step for us was how can we help out on the professional side. And so we were a partner of the World Finals last year, and we actually acted as a broadcaster for them. So we live streamed it through our TikTok channel, and so we used our, call it, reach to help the movement through our TikTok channel, and then we're actually about to house the finals now this year, actually in Turin in the Juventus Creator Lab. And we're quite excited about that because we'll have the best of freestyle in the world, arguably, coming into Italy, into our space here. And we intend to again try to spotlight the movement and tell a lot of great stories along the way.
Yeah. Again, big shout out to Dan. I walk out. If I walk outside right now in the office and start talking to the team about Dan, everybody's gonna have nice words for him. So definitely we need to shout him out. Um, See, what I'm thinking is what you just said. You're creating content and you're using two pillars, and I think people should learn about this. First, you're focusing on the story, with the freestyler, so it's going back to the storytelling. But then the other key piece is distribution. So it's not just creating wonderful stories, but you have to make sure that you reach the people that you want to reach through them. So that's an interesting lesson.
If I could add on to that point, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, that's the approach we've been taking with all of the stories we've been, I'd say, shooting within the Juventus Creator Lab. Is if you see most of our originals, they're not featuring star players. The first insight needs to come from, like, does this player have an interesting story to tell? And then we go from there, and that's where we start. So I mean, most of, I'd say, the players in the YouTube originals that we've brought to life, um, maybe people would discover them for the first time, but their stories are just so wonderful. Whether it's a women's movement, whether it's a player that came from a very difficult upbringing, or someone that had a tremendous injury, but it always starts from that place. To your point of, like, is there an interesting story? And then we work on the distribution afterwards.
And I love that because that's what actually helps connect with different fans around the world. No, it's not just, I mean, you're always going to have your hardcore fans. They're always going to be there. They're going to be loyal. But if you want to reach new fans, you kind of like have to find new ways to reach them, always with football as the essence. So I like that. The story comes before the player, but always having football as the essence there. And so much so that, you focus more on the story, that you even have Jay coming to the mix here. And he's one of your most popular characters, if you will, and generates some of the most popular content. So I was amazed by that. So I don't know if you could tell us, for those who don't know who Jay is, and then what's the secret behind the success of Jay here.
Yeah. So for the listeners, Jay is an animated zebra in a kid's a kid's cartoon. And I mean, most people don't know that if you would guess what Juventus's most viewed YouTube video is ever, you would think Ronaldo, and that would be a great guess. And that's what I would guess. But actually, we've got almost 100 million views on an animated kids show called Team J, and that's one video. And so Team J is a cartoon show. It's 3D animated, and so think more like Paw Patrol versus Peppa Pig, if I were to make some comparisons. It's beautifully brought to life. It's really comedic. It's actually not about football. Like, sure, there's football that is in it, but the show is more about values based. And so we did a lot of research on that one as well too, to understand the needs of parents, and how we can also help with young kids in that way. And so each show tries to tackle a different value, whether it's inclusion or environment. But that's the basis of the show. I'd say so far, it's performed really well for us. It's amongst the top kids shows on YouTube. We just launched season 2 of Team J a few months ago, and yeah, it's a great way for us to engage a young fan base that could be a future Juventus fan. If we look at when kids decide on which club they follow, typically it's in that 5 to 9 year old age range. If we look at that age range, and I've got 2 kids, and they're kind of on either ends of that, but kids at that age, the research shows that the platform that they use the most is actually YouTube. They typically are on tablets quite a bit, whether it's their own, scarily, or their parents. And the type of content that they're interested in is cartoons and ones that feature animals. And so Team J for me is where, like, great strategy meets great execution, in that the strategy was there, and then it was executed really, really well. And so Team J season 2 just launched. We've expanded it into different markets around the world now from a language perspective. And with the, I'd say, increase in usability of Gen AI and AI, there's also just so many more fun things that you can do with animated content now that you couldn't do a few years ago when we first launched the series. And so you'll see in the next coming months, there's some new innovations on Team J that we're gonna bring to life. But it's a different tactic on, say, again, if you're in marketing and you can't choose the players and you can't choose the performance on your club, and you need to find ways to engage a young audience, it's an interesting solution to try to do that.
That is a great point. At the end of the day, I think any club around the world can find stories somewhere. I mean, that's the key lesson here. There's always a story somewhere, somehow. And another key lesson that I want to come to back to it again is distribution, because you said it. You're focusing on YouTube because that's the research showed you that that's where you need it to be. So again, guys, for anybody listening, it's the story, it's the content that you're creating, and then it's the distribution. So it's always keeping those things in mind. And if you noticed, we've been talking for like half an hour, and we haven't even talked about the content that you could generate from the club being back finally at the Champions League. Which would be one of the first things you would think we would talk about here. No. So this leads me to my next question, which is, do you really think content can become a key pillar of the sports business model, in addition to your traditional, broadcasting, commercial, and match day?
It depends on the sport and the industry. Before I joined Juventus, I made a jump from Google, where I worked very closely on the YouTube side, to esports. And so I think in some newer industries and newer sports where you can't rely on traditional broadcast revenue, you have to rely heavily on content. And so, like in esports, from a commercial point of view, we were selling out of branded content because that was a key way for us to drive our business. Um, Within football, I don't think that content is going to directly exceed, in the short term, broadcast or stadium revenue. But I think it's going to be critical to sponsorship, which for most clubs is the second revenue driver after broadcast. I think sponsorship more and more is going to be driven by digital media, which is going to be driven by content. And I think content is going to prop up more and more the direct to consumer and the e-commerce side of the business. So I think there's probably a lot of listeners that would say, okay, show me the money on content now. Show me directly how it's benefiting the club and the flow of dollars or euros. My challenge to that is, look at the value given to sponsors these days and how much of that value is driven by digital. And then look at the potential that content can drive the e-commerce side of your business. And if you look at it that way, you'll see that content is extremely powerful in driving both the B2B and the B2C sides of the business. And then if we were to innovate and really think about how can we come up with ideas like what, as I mentioned earlier, a Mr. Beast or a Logan Paul or KSI have done with content, then that opens up all sorts of other opportunities, which could be quite compelling.
So in essence, in all of this, you're saying that content enhances the traditional business model across the three pillars, which I agree to your point. And I mean, I've been thinking about this for a while, but after listening to what you just said, it makes all the sense in the world. So thank you for that answer. And Mike, I also want to talk about innovation, because at the end of the day, you're innovating, but you're doing a lot of stuff around innovation. Um, one of the initiatives being Juventus Forward. So can you tell us more about what this is, and I guess why this and why now, basically, and what makes it unique?
Sure. So Juventus Forward is intended to be an incubator built inside of the company to ease the flow of innovation, to gatekeep and find and provide focus as to where we innovate, to come up with potential new revenue streams that don't exist today, and to help with marketing. I mean, Juventus has been seen and get the research that shows it as an innovative club for many years before my time, and so it can help us with that too. The timing, I think, is an interesting point. I mean, me coming from outside the industry, if I look at the macroeconomic picture of the industry, I wouldn't say that it's a secret that clubs are struggling with economics, and that's not unique to one club or another. And so, in most other industries, if they were seeing the macroeconomic headwinds that the football industry is seeing, my argument is they would be pouring lots of money into R&D, into diversification, into new revenue streams, because the current model doesn't work so well or hasn't proven to work so well. And so, from a very naive outside person coming in, you say, where is that in European football? And why isn't there more of it? And so that, I'd say, was the catalyst to build Juventus forward, was this like urgency or need to look at how we can diversify ourselves. And what we found along the way is I mean, that was the focus initially. But then what I've learned is there's a great opportunity for clubs to have an innovation department, because the speed and the pace of what's coming at us is so fast and so scattered. And so there's also like a pragmatic side of it that says that we can't all be experts at Gen AI, Web3, and if you can have someone or a few people even in a place where they can help the rest of the club understand better that space, and also channel like who can be a potential good partner, that eases the flow of innovation. And so what I've always said with Carol, who leads this team, is she can't be the dictator of innovation, because that creates a bad culture, but she can be really someone that helps ease the flow of innovation for the company. And so, so she's been doing a wonderful job at that.
That's interesting. Because as you said, you have to do this. I mean, it's inevitable. The wave is coming, so you have to surf the wave somehow. You know. So I guess, but I'm thinking you guys have a lot of like stakeholders at the end of the day. You know, our club is not isolated, so you could have that vision, but at the end of the day, you have to bring, I guess, sponsors, fans, anybody who's kind of like involved in the club. So how do you do that? How do you make them see that vision?
I mean, I think with that one, it comes down to numbers in the end. Like it's hard to look at the numbers and not see that you need to try new things. And so for me, uh, my personal take is never to be an iron fist, but to be someone that sits and listens and understands, and then provides like data and numbers to show that there are new and different directions that we could try to take. And that's what's I'd say been helping me and others in the company try some of these new things. But then again, back to some of my earlier points, both on us being we would consider us amongst the bigger clubs in football. But again, when you look at the media entertainment map, we're a speck of dust. Is We need to also be humble and try to push for more, and try to take on and experiment more. And so so I'd say that that approach is working quite well for us so far. I think what you would find across European football is there's there's one major challenge, that there can be quite a bit of short termism, let's just say, because of some of the macroeconomics. And um, and the short termism can often mean that a club will, instead of investing in the business to build something that can pay off and make the business and the fan experience stronger in 3 to 5 years, they'll throw money at a midfielder now because they don't want to be relegated, or because they want to qualify for a Champions League position. And so, in a blunt way, I'd say a lot of clubs face that, in terms of trying to push for new and trying to innovate, while having this really important pressing need that's right now, that's focused on relegation qualification.
I was speaking to a former executive at a top tier club. I won't name names just in case. And he was telling me that one of the challenges he faced is that 80% of the budget had to go into the, let's say, performance of the team. So when you fight against that, and it's really difficult to put in business initiatives. And I agree. But at the end of the day, you have to do it because if not, what happens? You know, and you're a good example of actually turning that around. You've lost star players, but still the value of the club has been increasing. No, so there's living proof there. So thanks for that. And I want to point out another framework that I think people can learn from, which is when you're looking into innovation, first it's about listening. What's out there? Then you come into the data. Then probably that leads you to having some insights. And that's where you push and that's where you implement any initiative. But then you don't stay there, which is then I push forward and I keep going. And this is ongoing, you know. So I thought that was interesting as well. And then Mike, a couple of months ago, I interviewed your friend Roger Mitchell, common friend, and he always talks about product market fit in sports. And I wanted to get your take on this. I always think of two different definitions of product market fit. One that it's the classic Sean Ellis question of how disappointed would you be if or how disappointed would the fans be if the product went away? And then the other one is, what can you uniquely offer that your fans in this case are desperate for? So that's what I want to ask you. When you look at it from the Juventus point of view, how would you define product market fit?
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, that's a classic Roger comment as well too, which is exactly right. Um, so what we've heard, because it's for me, it's never my answer. I feel like it's always I go back to some research study or some feedback that I've heard. I try to listen as much as I can. Hopefully you're seeing that. But what we've heard from our fans recently, I even heard it from Giorgio Chiellini, who just joined us in the company, is our value is really delivered through family and connection. And so, while a lot of clubs can say that they have that, the feeling that our fan club presidents, our players, as they say, that Juventus has really the feeling of family that I'd say transcends through the organization, or like we're one of the few still to this day family owned football clubs. It's over 100 years with the Agnelli family. And so we definitely have this family atmosphere and family connection. And that's something that's played back to me from our fans and from players. And so I think that that's the best answer. I'd say second to that would be entertainment, and some of what the Juventus Creator Lab has done lately has really played less in the connection space and more in the entertainment space. And so that would be, at least right now, something that I would say we're delivering in value that is unique at this point. And I'm sure that'll change, but I'd say for us, the product market fit is family and community paired with entertainment.
I like that. Family, community, and entertainment. I want to write that down also for the takeaways. And I guess this leads me to another question, which is, where do you think football is going? Because it seems there's all this content. A lot of critics would say that football is becoming, or football properties are becoming media brands. Others have even talked about them becoming e-commerce brands. I've heard clubs that are actually developing their own tech software. So do you think that football is going to evolve like that for the main brands to evolve into different businesses, or will they always be football clubs?
I think right now, to some extent, I mean, I think it depends on the size and scale of the club, where they are. I think right now there's many football clubs, and it would be probably unpopular for me to say this, but they are media brands already. I mean, by definition, if you look at their business and their P&L and where the money's coming in, they're media brands. I mean, the top two revenue lines are going to be broadcast, which is an exchange of revenue for visibility, and sponsorship, which is an exchange of revenue for visibility. So for me, I think there's a lot of football clubs today that I think it's unpopular to say because it feels less amateur sport and more business, but I think they are media brands. And so I see a continued evolution towards media brands. from an e-commerce position, sure. I think that there's a wonderful play on football brands. Again, doing content to commerce. I think there's some really unique smaller clubs that have just beautiful brand positions that can really see an interesting e-commerce business that's built out from them. From the tech side, I know that there's other clubs that are investing heavily in tech, and maybe that can be a revenue driver that's significant for them. But for us, I'm not so bullish on saying that Juventus would one day evolve to be a tech company because that's feels too far away from our core. And I don't know that I would suggest that we would compete in that space because the players that we would compete with are just far too large and too strong. I mean, I think that we should exist inside of the Netflixes and the Amazons and the DAZNs and the Apples, but I certainly don't want to compete with tech against those players because that's just a different core business that I wouldn't recommend us to go down that path. And so for me, to answer your question on the three, media, I think yes already. E-commerce, I'd say sure, especially depending on the club and where they're at, because there's not one solution for all clubs. And then the tech, I'm less bullish on because it feels like a really far step away from what is the core of most football orgs, and it's so competitive.
Mm. Appreciate you answering all of the three of those. And then another, let's say, buzzword, if you will, that's being thrown around the industry today is purpose. You know, we live in an era where everybody's looking to do some purpose-driven marketing. And as a marketer, I want to take you. I want to have your view on that. So, how do you guys approach social responsibility, the power of football to create social impact, which I think is there. You know, it's unique. Football can create so many powerful stories. But I wanted to see your opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I know we agree on this. I mean, when you look at just how many billions of people around the world are connected to football, I think there's an obligation amongst the big, say, brands and leagues in football to help society. Because, I mean, football touches all corners of the earth and just has so many people connected to it. So shame on us if we're not helping society because we have the power to do so. And that's one of the wonderful things about working in this sport. For us, I'd say it's not marketing. I mean, we see it as important. We're also we're a publicly traded company, and so there's areas within, let's say, the even ESG realm that we're obligated to do because of us being a publicly traded company. But I'd say the space that we've really leaned into in the past few years is really diversity and inclusion, and then more recently mental health. And then I'd say the third is pretty clear. It's on the front of our jerseys right now. Is we have Save the Children uh, right in the center of our jersey, and so that's not a new partnership, but it really shows that I mean Juventus is trying to help kids and the future by supporting those in need. So it's beyond a logo on a jersey. It's a substantial partnership that we've had for a while. On the D&I, diversity and inclusion side, um, for us, we've been really trying to focus on both awareness on certain topics like racism, um, violence against women. Um, we've partnered with Milano Pride, and so on the one hand, there's not to get too technical marketing, but like upper funnel awareness on some of these societal challenges, say. But then also try to be more pragmatic. And so, for instance, from a racism perspective, we've been communicating more and investing actually heavily into our stadium. The sheer amount of cameras that we have that are pointed everywhere. And I'm so impressed at how we can use our technology to point out and find behavior that shouldn't exist in our stadium and then address it immediately. And that is something that I would say not all clubs can say, and we do an extremely great job at it. And so that is a really, like I'd say, specific example where we're trying to combat something that doesn't align with our company values, and we're investing behind it. And we don't talk much about it, but it's quite impressive what we do there. The other one would be, I'd say, related to mental health. We see this. I mean, it's often quoted that amongst young people, they're the most connected of any generation, and at the same time, the most mentally unhealthy. And so we see that, and we've built a few seasons now of a podcast called Stories of Strength that focuses on the importance of mental health, and tries to address the stigma attached to like asking or needing help by also including players from all of our teams in the podcast, so that young people can see like it's okay if you have a mental health struggle. It's okay to even use those words, because look, these Juventus star players are acknowledging that they too take this very seriously, that mental health is important for your just general well-being, but also your performance on the pitch. And so we've worked with, I'd say, because we're not experts in the space, we've worked with experts in the space and paired them up in these podcasts with players and others to just try to bring to life again in a tangible way this idea of how you can better yourself mentally. And so I'd say those are diversity, inclusion, mental health, save the children. I mean, there's other things that we're doing as well too, but those I'd say would be the areas that in the past few years, certainly since I've joined, we've been quite vocal on.
Wow. Can't really add much more to that, because that's the way you answer that question, with specific initiatives and how you're elaborating on those and why you're doing them. So I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much, Mike. And overall, I mean, this has been an awesome masterclass, and we're just wrapping up now. I just have a couple of questions. But I wanted to thank you up front for that answer and for the conversation in general. Um, One thing I wanted to get your take on is, a couple of years ago at World Football Summit, we launched a rebrand. Um, Basically, we believe that the football industry needs to become more professional. It needs to be embracing innovation and, just having sustainability as a priority. And when I speak about sustainability, I think of three pillars, which is the financial, the social impact we've just discussed, and the environmental as well. No? And all of this, we actually summarized it through a claim that we said the football we want, the football we need. So if I were to ask you to define very briefly in 1, 2 sentences the football that you want or the football that you need, how would you do it?
I think the interesting challenge within football that I've learned, especially being new coming in, is there's so much legacy and history embedded into it. And so you can't and you shouldn't disrupt what you want football to be, because for some people, um, it's it's just got such history behind it. I think the football that you needs to have a societal relevance. I think it needs to, I mean, better our lives in some way. Um, and I think it needs to evolve from an entertainment perspective, because I think future generations are going to demand that.
I love that. Legacy, social relevance, and evolution. I like those three pillars. So thank you for that. So Mike, one last question that I is specifically tailored to you. Would you, what is one question that you think marketers in sports need to ask themselves more often?
So I think it would be, that's a great question. How can I innovate now to ensure that young audiences in 10 years will still be engaged? I think, as I spoke a little bit about earlier, that we have the tendency to think and focus short term. And my bias is I have a ton of urgency to act now so that we can continue to be as relevant as we are today in 10 years' time. And so I would ask and plead with marketers to really focus on how we can try things now and experiment now and evolve now, so that we can all be sitting in the same position that we are now in 10 years time. And I think if we don't do that, then we're going to miss a generation. And so I personally have a lot of, I'd say, urgency against that. And I would hope that others would too.
Goes back to relevance. Love that. How are we going to be relevant in 10 years, no? Good stuff. Mike, thanks so much. This has been awesome. And I truly mean this. I don't know if there's any last words that you want to share with the audience before we go.
No, thank you so much for having me, for having Juventus. It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
You guys are welcome back anytime. And I mean that. So you guys have an open invitation. Mike, thank you so much. Have a great day. And I'm sure we'll be in touch again. And hopefully we can share more stories of what you guys are doing.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
Thanks. And there you have him, Mike Amstrong, CMO at Juventus. I don't know where to start, other than just saying how appreciative I'm of this conversation, because you can't see the amount of notes that I've taken, and I'm going to try to summarize everything that I learned today with you guys. Probably it's going to take as long as the entire conversation, so bear with me, okay? But I think there's so many golden nuggets for you guys to take home. First thing is, today football, it just goes beyond 90 minutes. I think everybody knows that, right? That's where content is key. It's where you create the engagement. And remember, content drives engagement, and engagement leads to revenue. So that's why you need to consider it. But when you look about, how Juventus is approaching their content strategy, they have three pillars that are very distinct. First, they look into the story. So the storytelling is key. Then they look into the actual content itself. And then the distribution. That's another key thing, right? It doesn't really do anything if you have great content and great stories, but people don't hear about them, So for examples, we go back to Team J, remember why they decided to go into YouTube, no? The thing about content is it's an enhancer of the sports business model. It doesn't compete with the traditional pillars. Through good content, you're going to be able to give more value to your sponsors. Through good content, you probably can drive more sales, as he said it, content to commerce sales. So keep that in mind. And also, of course, you're going to create more interest from a broadcasting perspective, because ideally you're going to have more interest from fans around the world, no? So again, it enhances the entire sport business model. When looking about, we're talking about innovation, remember the framework. First, you have to listen. You have to research. Then you'll get your data. From there, you get some insights. And then that's where you implement your strategy, your initiatives, but then you keep pushing. Okay, remember that. That's the mentality to have. And then I also want to think about how he defined product market fit for Juventus, the three pillars that he defined, which is family, community, and entertainment. So if you look at your sports property, what words define product market fit for you guys, right? That's an interesting lesson to have. As also is the way he defined the football he wants and needs. I mean, I think Mike did a brilliant job there with legacy, societal relevance, and evolution. The football industry needs to evolve. The wave is coming. We need to surf it, right? And speaking about relevance, think about that question he was speaking at the end, which is how can football be relevant in the next 10 years? Have you thought about that? Yes, it is relevant today, but are you doing what you need to do to be relevant in the future? Anyway, this was such an inspiring conversation, and I'm just really energized by it. I really need to think and reflect on everything that Mike showed us today. Again, guys, if there's anything that stood out to you, feel free to reach out on social media. Share with us your feedback. And as always, share this episode with anybody in the industry that you believe could get value out of it. Subscribe, rate the podcast, share with your friends. You would not believe how much that helps us bring guests like Mike to the show. And also subscribe to our newsletter. That's where you'll find all of the updates that we have around our events. Anyway, nothing else from my side. I hope you enjoyed it, and I definitely did. And hope you have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you at the next episode of the World Football Summit podcast.